When the latest DLC, The Three Kingdoms, that introduced 5 new Chinese-based civilizations was announced, everybody got all up in arms about the new hero units that 3 of those 5 civilizations got access to, and everybody was convinced that those hero units were going to be a massive problem for ranked. They were not part of the game, they didn't belong in ranked, and they were going to be abusable and make things very messy, potentially very cheesy for lower ranked players, and everybody was super concerned about the heroes affecting ranked gameplay. So much so that Reddit was flooded with opinions left and right. Pro players such as myself and others clearly argued in favor of, this is not part of Age of Empires 2, this is very strange, kind of out of nowhere. And while the heroes were taking up a lot of attention, which by the way, didn't actually end up being a huge problem, you rarely see the heroes unranked, but that's the topic for another video, which I think I already made actually. The actual problem with this DLC completely flew under the radar, and the problem is Microsoft was trying to reinvent the wheel with this DLC, and nobody noticed until now. It's been a few months, we've done a lot of testing, and for me it's clear as day what the problem is with these new civilizations. And by the way, it's not just my problem, it's everybody's problem. Every single complaint from this latest DLC all comes from this one problem that 5 units share. Let me break it down to you real quick. So there's 5 new unique units that each belong to different civilizations. There's the Xianbei Raider, the Chariots, the Giant Swordsman, the Grenadier, and the Mounted Trebuchet. Now, these are not unique units that come out of the castle. Those are fine. These are unique units that are given that come out of different production buildings. Some out of the, workshop, some out of the archer range, some out of the barracks, so on and so forth. And the issue with these 5 units is that they don't have an elite upgrade. This is completely out of left field when it comes to Age of Empires 2, and there's not a single example before this that I can find that mimics this recipe and this formula. So it seems to be clear that Microsoft, or the devs that were working behind this, thought that this would be a good idea and that it would be different and that would maybe spice things up. And I feel like, yes, it's different, it is spicing things up, but I think in all the negative ways, and here's why. So before we really take a deep dive, I just want to say that generally speaking, the complaints out of these new civilizations and this new DLC is that some units and some strategies are a bit too overtuned, and in some cases way overtuned. Some civilizations like the Shu with the chariots jump to a 60+% win rate, and even after a couple nerfs to the chariot, they still sit at a high 50% win rate, and the latter is infested with FC all-in chariot rushes. And if the chariots aren't a problem, there's also FC Grenadier. That's a pretty big problem, catches a lot of people off guard. It's a very powerful strategy. Then you've got the Giant Swordsman and the Xianbei Raider that are incredible cast age options that basically don't really have anything that matches them. At best, you're just trying to survive or trying to go out of your way to counter them, and it just gets a little bit difficult to deal with those units when you just have a generic civ that doesn't have access to something similar. So what's the issue here, and why are these units being so problematic? I was thinking about it a lot randomly, and I came to the conclusion that the actual problem here is that none of these units have an elite upgrade. Take a look at this, for example. The Fire Lancer, which is a similar unit that also was introduced with this DLC, is very strong out the gate in Castlage. However, it has an elite upgrade. Generally speaking, most units have some of their stats hidden behind an elite upgrade. This is done by design because if you give all the stats right away in Castlage, the unit is either going to have one of 2 problems. You either give it too many stats and it's way too overpowered starting from Castlage with all those extra stats and whatnot, or you give it too little stats so it's usable in Castlage but then falls off and is completely useless in Imp. Those are basically the only 2 outcomes of not having an elite upgrade for a specific unit. You could work around it by having unique techs or unique bonuses that can kind of come in, which Microsoft tried on this last DLC, so I will give them some fair credit. They did try to make that happen. I'll show how later, but overall it's a lot easier to just give them an elite upgrade so that you can hide some of the stats and that raw power. So you give some of it in Castlage and then you hide some of it behind the elite tech in Imperial Age. This is done for all units. I mentioned the Fire Lancer, which would be absolutely broken if you just got an elite Fire Lancer in Castlage. Obviously that's not, that wouldn't make any sense. That unit is way too strong in the elite version, and even the Castlage version is decent. But for me, the Fire Lancer is a good example of a new unit done right. It's usable, it's solid in Castlage, it's strong, but it's not overpowered, and you can rush with it, but it has counterplay. Take a look at some of the other examples, like for example, Step Lancers. You have a strong Castlage version, then you have the elite version. Then you take a look at Eagle Warriors, classic in the game. You have the standard version, it gets upgraded a little bit. You have a Castlage upgrade and an elite version with another upgrade to it. So 2 upgrades on the Eagle Warrior compared to 0 of the Giant Swordsman. So let's take a look at exactly what's happening here. Giant Swordsman leaves certain civilizations with with no counterplay whatsoever. The unit just has way too many raw stats in terms of pierce armor, damage, how cheap it is, no upgrades necessary to get it out, and it just comes out very, very quickly and very powerfully in Castle Age. Some civilizations like Hindustani and the Gurjaras simply have no answer to this unit besides the longswords and Imperial Age, and those two things take a lot of time and a lot of effort to tech into and to get to, that the Jan Swordsman player usually just has a field day, and that unit can just feel unstoppable in those matchups. And the issue is, staying on topic of the Jan Swordsman, is that while the unit is insane in Castle Age and potentially even overpowered, it actually falls off really hard in Imperial Age. The Jan Swordsman is not useless in Imp, it's usable, but it's very, very, very low power, and it's like super situational. You almost never want to use it. It just comes up here and there as a raiding unit, but not much more. This is because there's no elite upgrade, and so the stats that are given in Castle Age, despite being very good for Castle Age, kind of just fall short and are not that impressive in Imperial Age. Now, the devs did try to off-put it by giving the Jan Swordsman +2 attack in Imperial Age, so they're clearly aware of this unit needing a little bit of a buff going into Imperial Age, and they try to solve it with this Civ bonus, which kind of does the trick. But for me, it's really a band-aid solution, because yes, it does get a little bit better, but it gets better in a very weird way. It gets only attack, whereas usually an elite upgrade, you have to tech into it, so you have to invest into it, but you get a lot more as the payback. Here, there's no investment, but you get a small payback that could be good, but could also just not matter if you're mainly focused about needing extra armor or HP. And so it just leaves the Jan Swordsman in such an awkward state. It's either overpowered or it's useless, depending on the situation and depending on the state of the game. And if you guys know me as a content creator, as a player in general, I don't like extreme scenarios at all. Like, I think it's necessary to have a couple extreme rushes where you can go for some all-ins and whatnot, but I don't like it to be a natural and a normal occurrence to have these extreme differences between a unit being either overpowered or useless. I like a lot of gray area, a lot of strategic decisions where units could be good, you can kind of tech into them a little, then swap out, then go back into them. A lot of decisions that could be made on the fly. Nothing really pops out. You've got a lot of options. I love that kind of strategic diversity a lot more than it's either broken or it's useless, nothing in between. And so these 5 units, from the Zambia Raider, the Chariots, the Jan Swordsman, the Grenadier, and the Mounted Trebuchet, all suffer from the exact same problem. Because there's no elite upgrade, they're either really strong at a certain point or really useless if that point is no longer there. Now, the Mounted Trebuchet is probably the one unit that's not really a problem. It's kind of the black sheep. It still doesn't have an elite upgrade, but at least it's locked behind Imperial Age. So it kind of reminds me a little bit of like the Bombard Cannon, where it could come out, but because it's locked behind Imperial Age, it's really just not that impressive. Because by the time you get it out, other civs have some kind of options to deal with it. So it ends up being fair enough. The other 4, though, are all involved in some kind of all-in rush or some kind of cheese, and a lot of people are really complaining about it. And by the way, I did give an example earlier about like Step Lancers and Eagle Warriors having specific upgrades, elite upgrades, to make them better from one age to the next. But this comparison is not actually one-to-one. These are regional unique units and not unique units specific to one civilization. However, I found one other example in the game that I can find. Maybe there's more, I don't know. Didn't give it that much thought. But it's actually the Shiramsha Rider. That's the one other example that is a unique unit from a stable that has an elite upgrade that is specific to one civilization only. The Genitor has an elite upgrade, but it's a team bonus, so it could affect multiple people, not just the Berber player. But even that one has an elite upgrade. The Shiramsha Rider from the Gurjaras. It's a unique unit, exactly like some of the other ones on this list, but it has an elite upgrade. And thank God it does, because the Castle Age version, not that strong, but usable, and the elite version, in some cases, very strong, but not overpowered either. So the Shiramsha Rider really found its way to be a solid unit mixed into Age of Empires 2, and really does not feel that out of place. Don't get me wrong, this unit has a whole host of other potential, in quotations, problems. Some people just absolutely hate it, but I think it's found its way naturally into the Age of Empires 2 ecospace, and it's, at least for the most part, accepted. It's not really problematic, and it certainly is not overpowered. And so what's the solution to this issue? How do we solve the chariot rushes that are dominating the ladder? How do we deal with Jan Swordsman just destroying certain matchups? What can stop FC Grenadier from being the fastest and most efficient way to get to a powerful gunpowder unit in the game? Well, I think the solution is just to not reinvent the wheel. Forget about this whole like giving unique units that don't have elite upgrades and then we find a way to balance them in Imperial Age later on using other things. I think you just give each of these units, besides maybe the Mounted Trebuchet, an elite upgrade. It would solve literally all the problems. Jan Swordsman will be solid in Castle Age, you can maybe tone them down a little, and then give them extra stats and imp to make them very viable. Same thing for the Zambia Raider, same thing for the Chariots, same thing for the Grenadier, and everything would be completely solved. Instead, what Microsoft seems to be doing right now is trying to stick with the current situation and trying to really tweak all the numbers and trying to make it work without the elite upgrade. But the problem with that is, how do you tweak the numbers? If you lower them too much, the unit's going to be useless, not playable in Castle Age, and certainly not playable in Imp because it's not going to be upgraded to any elite version. And if you don't tweak the numbers and you just leave them as is, then people will continue complaining about certain units being way too overtuned in early Castle Age. And in fairness, it's not the biggest deal. I don't think any of these, like just me speaking from my experience, I don't think any of these strategies are broken, overpowered, unplayable. Like you can't counter them. I think each of these strategies or each of these units have some counters. And I think if you play strategically, you can easily fend them off in most scenarios. Or not easily, but you can fend them off. It's doable. So it's not the craziest issue. But when you consider tens of thousands of people playing this game daily, not everybody's going to be able to execute defense as good as offense. And when it comes to just getting up to Castle Age and spamming one of these units, the defense is a lot harder to execute than that option of just making one unit and hoping and praying it works. And so in general, I feel like it is worth taking a look at some of these units and kind of solving the issue that a lot of people are facing with them, in that they're just way too efficient in early Castle Age and way too hard to stop for a generic civilization. That is all for this video. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I think that Microsoft should just add an elite upgrade to all of these units, except the Mount of Trebuchet again. And I think that would solve all the issues. But let me know if I missed something. Maybe you guys have a different take on what can be done about this. Maybe it's not that big of a problem after all. No, maybe you guys disagree and you think it's completely fine to have these units as is. Do let me know in the comments. I'm going to read every single one of them, as I always do. I don't have a live. I just read comments and make videos. That's what I do. So I'll read the comments and I'll see what the conversation is looking like. But as always, hope you guys have a good one. Take care. Make sure to check out my Patreon and my Twitch. Link into both in the description below. And as always, have a good rest of your day. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.